Not every lion is born equal. Some arrive small and fragile, destined to disappear before their first hunt. But on one scorching afternoon in the heart of the Serengeti, a cub emerged who seemed sculpted by something greater. His shoulders were broad even as he stumbled into the light, his cry deeper than his littermates. His name would echo across the savanna, Ragna. The pride sensed it instantly. Around him, the air seemed heavier, as if the grass itself bent to acknowledge his arrival. His golden coat shimmered under the sun, and his eyes, sharp, unflinching, were not those of a newborn. They carried the weight of storms, the calm before the roar of thunder. From his first steps, Ragna revealed a brutal truth. He was not made for survival. He was made for dominance. While his brothers fought clumsily for milk, he pushed them aside with a force that startled even the lionesses. His hunger was not just for food, but for space, for control, for the crown no cub yet understood. In the wild, weakness means silence, and silence means death. But there was nothing quiet about Ragna. His growls rolled like distant thunder, low and unsettling, forcing his siblings to retreat. He was larger than them all, not by chance, but by destiny. Nights in the savanna were ruthless. Hyenas prowled the shadows, leopards waited in trees, and vultures circled above. Yet whenever the pride lay exposed under the cold moon, the lionesses rested easier when Ragna pressed against them. His mere presence radiated survival, a silent promise that danger would not dare. The savanna does not give legends freely. It demands blood, hunger, and suffering. And yet, Ragna seemed to rise above it, a storm wrapped in fur, a creature that looked less like a cub and more like the first sketch of a king. Could the savanna contain him? Could rivals survive him? These questions hung heavy in the heat as Ragna's story began. A story not of survival, but of absolute rule. And now, we want to hear from you. Where are you watching this story from? Drop it in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to Wild Dominion so you don't miss the rise, the reign, and the fury of Ragna, the 420 kg titan. As the seasons turned, the savanna itself seemed to grow around Ragna. By the time he reached 2 years, his frame was colossal. His paws, heavy as hammers, left impressions in the dirt that lasted long after he passed. The other young males avoided him instinctively, their bodies whispering what their minds already knew. This was no ordinary lion. His mane grew thick and dark, curling like fire against the wind. It gave him the look of an emperor draped in a natural crown. When he moved, wildebeests scattered in panic, and zebras lifted their heads in eerie silence, sensing that this predator was cut from something sharper than instinct alone. Ragna tested his strength early. He hunted not just to eat, but to dominate. While his pride brought down antelopes, he hurled himself at buffaloes, creatures strong enough to kill a careless lion with a single strike. Many lions feared them. Ragna welcomed the risk. The clash of horn against muscle became his baptism of power. One by one, his rivals fell away. Young males who dreamed of glory found only scars when they faced him. His roars carried across the plains, echoing through the bones of every creature that heard them. To the lionesses, he was both shield and storm, safety wrapped in danger, certainty born from violence. Ragna's reign began not with words, but with silence. No coalition dared to challenge him. No hyena pack lingered when his scent tainted the air. The savanna, cruel to the weak, bent to him as though it had no choice. He was building not just strength, but dominion. Even the elders of the pride, scarred by decades of survival, looked upon Ragna with reverence. They had seen kings rise and fall, but never one who stood like this. Massive, unyielding, his muscles coiled like stone carved by centuries. Ragna was not growing into a lion, he was ascending into myth. At dusk, as the sky burned crimson, he would climb the ridges and stare over miles of grasslands. The wind whipped through his mane, and in those moments he appeared less like a beast and more like the embodiment of the savanna itself, a living law, unbreakable and absolute. Yet power is never left untested. Whispers began to drift through the plains of rival coalitions, gathering strength. Lions who did not bow would soon come for him. And the question was no longer whether Ragna could fight, but how many he could destroy. This was only the beginning. His rise was unstoppable, his reign inevitable. And before we reveal the first war of the Colossus, let us know in the comments, which predator do you think could ever rival Ragna? Don't forget to subscribe. The legend is only just starting. The savanna does not forgive kings. For every lion that rises, another sharpens his claws in the shadows. Ragna's dominance had grown too vast, too loud, and nature responded with challenges. 3 young males, scarred and hungry for territory, marched into his land under the cover of twilight. The first clash shook the plains. Dust spiraled into the air as Ragna charged, his mane blazing like a crown of fire. The rivals roared back, but their unity crumbled under the force of his fury. With a single swipe, he broke the jaw of one intruder, his roar splitting the night like thunder. Yet battles in the savanna are never clean. Hyenas arrived, drawn by the scent of blood and chaos. Dozens of them snarling, circling, laughing their cruel laughter. It was no longer 3 lions against 1. It was Ragna against the entire savanna. He fought like a storm unleashed. His jaws clamped down on a hyena's throat, silencing its cries instantly. He hurled another into the dust with the weight of his 420 kilos, but for every body that fell, more closed in. His mane dripped with blood, his breath thundered, yet his eyes never wavered. The lionesses of his pride joined the fray. Fierce and loyal, they carved through the hyena ranks, their claws ripping into flanks, their roars answering Ragna's fury. The plain became a battlefield of dust and screams, a primal war where survival was written in blood. By dawn, the earth was stained dark. Dozens of hyenas lay torn across the grass, vultures already circling overhead. The 3 rival males, broken and battered, limped into exile, their dreams of conquest scattered like bones. Ragna stood in the center of the carnage, his chest rising and falling, his mane soaked but unbowed. From that day, whispers spread farther than before. Ragna was no longer just a lion. He was a warlord, a living engine of destruction. His roar was not simply a warning, it was a verdict. And every creature that heard it understood. The savanna had chosen its ruler, but power is a curse as much as it is a crown. Every victory draws new enemies. Every roar echoes into distant lands where other kings plot revenge. The war for the savanna was far from over. Ragna's fury had only begun to carve his empire. Who do you think could ever stand against Ragna? Another lion, a pack of hyenas, or something far more dangerous? Dawn after dawn, the savanna awoke beneath a single voice. Ragna's roar rolled across the plains like thunder, shaking acacias, scattering vultures and silencing hyenas in their dens. It was not a call, it was a command. For miles, no creature dared to ignore it. His mane, dark and vast, crowned him like a cloak of fire. The scars across his muzzle told of battles survived, but none lost. When he strode through the grasslands, the herds scattered long before he appeared, as though the earth itself whispered of his approach. Lions ruled through coalitions, through numbers, but Ragna was different. He ruled through weight, through fear, through a brutality that needed no allies. Rivals who wandered too close were dismantled before their pride's eyes, their broken bodies left as warnings carved into the soil. Hyena clans that once swarmed like plagues now fled at the scent of him. Packs of 20, 30, even 50 scattered in chaos when his shadow stretched over the dust. For the first time in memory, hyenas abandoned hunts, leaving carcasses untouched, choosing hunger over the chance of crossing the Titan. The lionesses of his pride thrived under his reign. With Ragna as their shield, they hunted boldly, roaming farther than before. Cubs grew strong in the safety of his shadow, their games played on bones of enemies he had crushed. He was both the sword and the wall, a paradox of destruction and protection. His reign was not only marked by dominance, but by terror. The Maasai who watched from the horizon spoke his name in hushed tones, telling stories of a lion too massive to be real, a beast that walked like thunder, a phantom of power. Some called him cursed, others divine. All agreed he was untouchable, yet legends attract challengers as fire draws moths. Lone males crept from distant ranges, desperate to test themselves against the ruler of the Serengeti. Each one was crushed, each roar silenced. Ragna's empire grew not just in size, but in myth, a dominion where death itself seemed to serve him. The savanna was no longer neutral ground. It was his kingdom, a place where even the wind seemed to bow. And in this reign, nothing stood without his permission. Ragna was no longer just a lion, he was a law carved into flesh and blood. If you stood in the savanna and heard his roar echo through the night, would you see him as king or as a monster? No reign lasts forever. Even for a lion carved into legend, the savanna always whispers of trials yet to come. For years, Ragna had stood unchallenged, a living wall of muscle and fury, but power does not remain untested, and one dusk, the horizon delivered what could be his undoing. It began with a distant roar, deeper, longer, a voice not trembling but confident. Another coalition had arrived, 3 males bound by blood, young enough to burn with ambition, old enough to know the craft of war. They did not flee at Ragna's scent, they followed it. The plains trembled as the rivals approached, their manes flared like storm clouds, their paws steady, their eyes fixed not on fear but on conquest. This was no accidental crossing. This was a march of intent, a declaration. The throne was no longer his alone. When the clash erupted, the ground itself seemed to shake. Ragna hurled himself forward with the weight of 420 kilos, a living avalanche of fur and bone. His jaws closed on the shoulder of the first rival, tearing flesh and bone alike. Blood sprayed the grass like red dust. But coalitions survive where titans struggle. As Ragna crushed one, the other 2 pounced. Claws raked across his flank, tearing stripes of crimson into his golden hide. Teeth sank into his mane, dragging him down into the dirt. For the first time in years, the king bled. The lionesses cried out, circling in terror and fury, but none dared to interfere. This was not their fight. This was destiny weighing itself against the titan. Dust, blood, and roars mixed into a storm that swallowed the night. Again and again, Ragna rose, throwing his enemies off, his chest heaving, his eyes burning with something beyond rage, a refusal to surrender. Every scar carved into him only sharpened the myth. Every wound became proof that he was still unbreakable. Yet even giants stumble. As dawn broke, the rivals regrouped, circling once more. Ragna stood, his mane torn, his body a map of scars, his breath ragged but defiant. He had not fallen, but neither had he won. The savanna, silent, waited for the verdict. If you were there that morning, watching the bloodied titan face 3 hungry kings, would you believe Ragna could still hold his throne? Or was this the beginning of his end? Dawn bled across the horizon, painting the savanna gold and crimson, as if the land itself bore witness to the price of kingship. Ragna stood alone, battered, scarred, yet unbroken. The rivals had vanished into the distance, their ambitions shattered by the weight of a lion who refused to kneel. His mane, torn and stained with blood, flowed in the wind like a banner of war. Each scar across his body became more than a wound. It was a signature, proof that he had faced the impossible and still claimed the throne. To the eyes that watched him from the shadows, he was no longer a lion. He was inevitability itself. In the weeks that followed, the savanna fell quiet beneath his reign. Hyena clans abandoned their territories rather than risk his wrath. Elephants shifted their migrations to avoid his domain. Even other lions adjusted their hunts, steering clear of the land that now carried a single name, Ragna's Plain. The Maasai whispered stories around their fires, tales of a lion who carried storms in his chest, who fought not as a beast, but as a god of war. Some called him the Titan of the Serengeti. Others believed he was cursed, a soul too heavy for the earth to hold. Yet all agreed, His rule was unlike any they had ever known. Time, however, spares no king. Seasons would pass, herds would move, and younger males would always rise from the horizon. But Ragna's name had already carved itself into the soil. Even when his roar finally faded, the echoes lingered, vibrating through the bones of the savanna. For the lionesses, he was not only protector, but prophecy fulfilled. Cubs grew beneath his shadow, learning from the weight of his presence what it meant to survive, to rule, to endure. In them, his blood carried forward the story of dominance and defiance. Long after his paws would no longer press into the earth, vultures would circle above old battlefields, and scavengers would walk paths marked by his reign. Every gust of wind through the tall grass carried a question. Was he real, or was he a legend sculpted by fear and awe? Ragna became more than a king. He became a myth, a titan of 420 kilograms, a beast that no rival could truly conquer, a law written into the bones of Africa itself. To speak his name was to summon the memory of power, and now we ask you, if you could stand in the heart of the Serengeti and hear the roar of Ragna, would you see him as a savior of the pride, or as the monster that ruled without mercy?